Hi guys, this is Hiro, and today I'm going to be going over the Venus Mahadasha period or any Venus period in general, okay? So I'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing we know about Venus is that it's the greatest material benefic out of all the planets, right? Even Jupiter. Jupiter would kind of represent the greatest spiritual benefic. But this is why, Jupiter comes after Rahu, which is focused on materialism, and Venus comes after Ketu, which is focused on spirituality, right? Because it's kind of giving you you could say like a spiritual break in a sense. But now, what do we know? Venus owns what? Taurus and Libra. So there's going to be a strong emphasis on this period to kind of enjoy relations, and as far as like luxuries and enjoyment goes outside of relations, like just with material things in general, right? Now, we need to understand something here is that Venus, it comes right before also Sun and Moon Dasha periods, right? And Sun and Moon are two very, very, very important planets, right? So they own, like, Sun represents identity and Moon represents mind, right? So your Venus, okay, we need to see how it fits in this story. So Venus, it comes right after Ketu, right? So Ketu was like a harsh period of just being ripped away from whatever material things you were meant to be ripped away from, so that you can, pursue, enlightenment, moksha, and kind of see the spiritual truth, very, very quickly, you could say. Ketu is only 7 years, but then you have your Venus period, right? So your Venus period, it's okay. Once you kind of realize the truth, the reason Venus comes after Ketu is it's like, okay, once you kind of done all the karmic, stuff and learning that you need to do, your Venus comes and now you can kind of enjoy these things more properly, more groundedly, right? For example, if Venus came, right before Rahu, you could say, this wouldn't really fit, right? Because you hadn't really learned all the lessons from, that Rahu to Ketu cycle in order to enjoy, what Venus is going to give you, right? So this is why Venus comes right after Ketu. Now, Venus comes right before Sun and Moon, right? So why does this happen? Because Sun represents identity and Moon represents mind. All your enjoyment, pleasures, material things, etc., heavily affect your identity and your mind. Okay, so your whatever happens in this period, when your Sun and Moon starts, it's going to show you how it's affecting your identity and your mind. Okay, and then the cycle keeps going. Now, one thing to understand here is that, okay, your Venus, it's going to have, certain enjoyments for you, certain pleasures, luxuries, etc. But we cannot get attached to how these things play out. And I will give you an example right now. So our soul has desires, right? That's the whole reason it came to this birth, right? Or one of the reasons, you could say. There's certain things that it needs a human body to do to experience or accomplish. Now, we need to understand that our ego also has an infinite amount of possibilities and ways that it wants things to get done that are never going to get done, right? Like, for example, I'll take, the greatest human desire ever, which is to be in like some kind of relationship, like a romantic one, you could say. So our soul could have some desire to experience this, right? And, depending on your chart, and I'll get to this in a second, that desire is going to manifest its way into your life in some fashion that, is acceptable to your soul's desire, as well as, the karma that you have coming in. Okay. But your ego is always going to get attached to how this desire plays out, right? Like, for example, it could have to be with a certain person, or it could have to be, this person has to have, these specific, traits, okay, material traits that, don't really affect how things are operating on a spiritual level, or that has no impact on your true spiritual desire of how, your soul wants things to play out, okay? Or, it has to happen, from by this certain way, at this certain place, at this certain time, etc. There's all kinds of infinite amount of variables that your ego has. Now, I'm going to tell you the dangers of. The first thing is, there's two parts to this. There's this first danger, and then there's the second part of another danger that we'll get to after this. So this first danger is getting attached to how the ego wants things to play out, right? And this is a disaster. Why? One, you just finished your Ketu, right? So most likely something, not so pleasant could have happened during Ketu, right? Someone could have got ripped from your life. Someone could have got placed in your life that you didn't want at all. And that caused, a lot of emotional baggage and stuff like this. So if you're too attached to, like, let's just say with a person, if you're too attached to how, someone's going to come in and, fix everything emotionally and all this kind of stuff, this is not going to end well, right? Because all the greatest things could happen, someone, let's just say hypothetically, someone super good looking, comes in with, the perfect personality and stuff like this. But, if your ego is too attached to how this hypothetical person should have made you feel because of, something bad that happened, in your Ketu period, and, you're not able to get over it and blah, blah, blah. And this new person didn't make you feel a certain kind of way, or it didn't make you detached from old experiences the way that, your ego kind of wanted this, or kind of hyped up this new, hypothetical future new person to do. Then this is not gonna, be too great of an experience, right? Because even if this thing happens, you're not like, it doesn't really mean anything. It's not giving you any enjoyment. Your ego's still caught up on, nonsense, right? So we need to kind of attach to how we expect things to be, not only materially, but also emotionally, right? Someone is not just going to come in and, every single bad experience of the past, you're just going to forget, right? This is not, your ego is going to use those bad experiences kind of as, to make you kind of its mental prisoner, okay? I hope that really made sense. Now, that was kind of the first danger, right? To kind of detach from how we expect things to be. And if we don't do this, it's going to get even worse as, we get into our sun, moon, Mars, and Rahu, right? Because our identity is kind of going to get involved. Our mind's going to get involved. We kind of haven't done, the proper work that, most likely that we should have done in Ketu. So this is just one kind of thing to just expect, okay? But just because of, the nature of the world we live in, most of us, when we go through Ketu, we don't necessarily, you could say head towards enlightenment in the same way we're supposed to. Or the same way that we would have done in older times. Okay, it's just something to keep in mind. Now the second part is something that not a lot of you might think you have a problem with, but you possibly might, and I will get to this in a second. So, I'm getting to this right now. So the second part is that we need, our soul has certain desires that we come into in this life, right? So that we need to fulfill these desires. Or else, when our sun, moon, and Mars and Rahu starts, that energy is going to be a little bit imbalanced. Okay, the whole reason we're having Venus is so that desires, can get fulfilled. But if we have some kind of judgment, especially spiritual judgment, on how these desires are getting fulfilled, this is not good, right? Because our identity and our mind are not going to go through the journey that they're supposed to. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say you get into some great relations, right? And usually this is two parts. So the first, thing that I mentioned about, not detaching, and the second part about not fulfilling your desires, usually out of some sort of fear, usually some sort of fear of expectations or something like this, or not getting what you want. Usually they kind of go hand in hand, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's just say, you haven't detached from something bad that happened in Ketu. And in Venus, this fear stems that, nothing's ever going to be the same, blah, blah, blah. So you don't do anything, right? You push every single opportunity, you kind of try to toss it to the side, right? You don't do anything. You put some kind of judgment on, any sort of desire that you want to fulfill. And this can go outside of relations, right? This could be food or something like let's just say, I'll just continue with the relation example, and then I'll continue to other examples after, right? So let's just say, Ketu, something bad happened. Venus, you place some kind of judgment on yourself, or you have some sort of extreme fear, and you don't do what your soul kind of is really itching to do, right? What'll happen is when your sun and moon starts, let's just say you did do what you were supposed to do in Venus, right? You got into some sort of relations, blah, blah, blah. When your sun starts, you'll see kind of how that, that relation is making you real proud, right? And when your moon starts, you'll kind of start to see how, mentally, like some relation like this would affect you. And then you continue on your journey. But if you don't go through the certain desires, like for example, a relation that could come in Venus, out of fear, let's say, you won't have the experiences that, in the learning period that, the sun and moon and Mars and Rahu, etc., going down will provide you, right? Which is not ideally the best. Also, so we need to consider this, that because we didn't do the things in Venus, when sun starts, it'll feel like, your identity could feel like, man, I really missed out. And, your soul's kind of like, yeah, we kind of missed out of fear. And your identity's trying to like overcompensate. And it might do something not the greatest, right? It might get into some, quickly into some relations with someone that you're not supposed to get into. Stuff like this. Okay, this is not good. You might have that imbalanced energy. Okay, so the whole point here I'm trying to make is that you do not want to have imbalanced energy. And the way we do that is by tackling both ends of the coin. First aspect, by detaching from all our, expectations and stuff like that, especially, from some bad stuff that could have happened in Ketu or, before that, even in Saturn, whatever. The second part is to not really live out of failure, right? So, failure or fear. So, like, just because, nothing was perfect, right? And our mind can kind of trick us that, we've detached and we don't care. But our soul at the end of the day still has desires of why it's came here, right? Partially why it's still here. So we need to understand that, sure, we could have detached and, rationally acknowledged whatever we needed to, but we still have certain stuff that, we need to do, and we can't let failure of like, possibly having, similar outcomes or stuff like this affect, our, fulfillment of desires. Okay. So there's got to be a balance. Okay. We can't just fully, go, head blazing in, like, with all our kind of, mental baggage and, just really acting ungroundedly in how we're, pursuing our desires, right? Or else this is not going to end up good. We're not going to find any sort of fulfillment in Venus or enjoyment that, we want to. And we also can't live out of failure, right? Because this one, with the first situation, we're, ungroundedly overdoing it. And in this situation, we're ungroundedly underdoing it, okay? Both of these are going to, like I basically said the whole video, are going to, result in, ungrounded spiritual energy going forward into the rest of the cycle. Okay, Venus is a great period to kind of reset everything. Okay, because it's, like I said, it's one of the best material benefics. It's not the harshest by any means, so it's a great way to, just really set the slate slate clean. Okay. Now, one other thing to keep in mind. How do we know kind of how our Venus is going to be? Okay, because some people don't have it the best, blah, blah, blah. Look at 3 charts. Look at the D1, obviously, the D9, and the D7, okay? And Venus is very important. Why? Because the D7 and D9 are 2 of the most important charts in our divisional charts in our whole life, especially the D9, okay? And Venus kind of, you could say, is the karaka of the D9 chart, you could say. So look at where it is here. Now, D1 kind of just shows, okay, the houses Venus rules, it's going to give effects of those houses as well as, what it naturally owns. Where it's placed, it's kind of going to show, okay, the houses that, Venus rules, how it's trying to fulfill, its agenda of those houses, right? And I'm going to get into some other details later. But the D9 shows, you could say, how things are operating more at a spiritual level, right? The 9th house itself shows what you're learning. So the reason why people say that or, the scriptures say that, the D9 chart shows marriage. It's not necessarily on a material sense, right? The material sense of marriage is shown from the D7, okay? D7 is literally almost, you could say, like the 7th house, like in more finer detail. The D9 chart is more the 9th house, but both of them have an effect on your relationships, right? This is why people say the 9th house in general governs your second marriage. Okay, it's not necessarily blindly it governs your second marriage. It's because usually in a second marriage, you are focusing more on, the spiritual aspects of a relationship, not the young, immature, ungrounded aspects, material aspects of a relationship that more the D7 chart shows. But in Venus, you got to look at both. Both of them are always present in any relation, okay? I don't care if it's your 5th marriage, okay? Or whether it's your 1st, okay? There's some material and some spiritual aspects present in all relations, okay? So this is where the D7 and the D9 charts come into play. And the D1 chart shows, just kind of what's happening on a surface. D7, how things are operating more internally, materially with any relations you might have. And D9 is more how things are operating more spiritually in regards to anything in your life from a material enjoyment standpoint, okay? And specifically the houses that Venus rules in those 2 charts, or 3 charts, including the D1, in respect to what those charts represent. So I hope that makes sense. Also, look at what planets are conjunct or aspecting Venus in these charts, okay? So with regards to these certain areas that I just represented, or that I just kind of described, okay, we need to see how, the planets sitting with Venus or aspecting Venus are, playing a factor there. Okay. For example, let's just say you have, Mercury conjunct Venus in your D7 chart, right? So that means that, I'll give you an example, like with regards to the material aspects of relations. Okay. This is why D7 chart owns, childbirth, you could say, because, how to create a child, it's obviously a very material, lustful thing you have to do. So you could say that, your Mercury and your Mercury is kind of affecting your Venus a lot in your D7. Okay. Now, how this plays out, you got to see what house they're in and stuff. There's infinite amount of possibilities. Okay. Or for example, if your Mars is with your D9, there's some kind of aggressive nature, in regard to, how you're spiritually, learning things, stuff like this. Okay. Or if Jupiter's, with Venus in your D1 chart, overall at a surface, you could say the higher conscious is guiding, your Venus decisions overall. Okay. So this is kind of just what it means at a general sense. This is a pretty general video. Okay. So if you have any questions or comments, you can let me know. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for watching.